Nation. As always, if you'd like to join the conversation this evening, please text us on 0493 213 831. We'd love to have you with us. My conversation partner this evening is Danielle Brustman, Melbourne-based studio encompassing a broad spectrum of practice from residential interiors and commercial design for the hospitality, education and retail sectors through furniture, objects and lighting design for exhibition and installation. Danielle trained at RMIT Melbourne in the School of Architecture and Design, obtaining a Bachelor of Arts in Interior Design. Danielle's approach to interiors, object and furniture design synthesises her cross-disciplinary skill set and innovative practice, with a distinctive flair for colour, materiality, composition and form. Her signature interiors and furniture present a unique visual language that integrates striking aesthetic with a pragmatic and considerate approach to spatial design. Her work is narrative-driven and informed by dynamic colour relationships, geometric form and fantastical spaces. Danielle's work has been widely recognised across prestigious awards, publications and exhibitions. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Ilana. Hello.
So good to have you here in the studio.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
The first question I like to ask all my guests on the show actually is, what's your earliest memory of a building or place?
Of a building?
Yeah, of a building or place.
I think my earliest memory is one of the houses that I lived in as a child. It was, I think I lived there from the age of 1 until 8, I think. And it was an old double-storey Victorian terrace in North Fitzroy. And I remember it quite vividly.
What colour was it?
It was white on the outside. Don't remember. I don't know what the colours were on the inside actually, which is interesting. I don't remember the interior. I remember the facade, and I remember the spaces. I think it was sort of just beigey, creamy, kind of off-white colour inside.
Were you able to have a reaction to that? Did you have an opinion on it as a child at all?
No, I don't think I had an opinion on it because it wasn't like a thrilling kind of interior. But I have like other houses that belong to other members of my family that are a bit more exciting.
Say more.
Well, my grandmother's house was quite magical, and it was, I'm not sure when, I think it was built in the 1940s, but renovated in the 1960s, and it had all of those wonderful it had that fantastic 60s flair to it. So it had red and blue kind of geometric tiles in the bathroom, and there was one room that had like these fantastic green patterned curtains, and there was a shag pile carpet. Amazing. And a really interesting like geometric wallpaper in the kitchen. So that was the house really that sort of, set off my imagination and interest really in design and interiors.
Which grandmother's house was this? Because
it was my dad's mother's house. Yeah.
You have an amazing exhibition right now showing at the Jewish Museum. I could have danced all night about your grandmothers.
Yeah, I do.
That is why I'm asking which grandma, which jewellery box am I connecting this home with in my mind?
Yeah, it's with the it's connected to the grandmother that I've made a music box about. So yeah, interesting, this home, this sort of house that I'm describing kind of sets the scene for the environment in which the inspiration behind this project comes from. So my grandmother was also very musical, and she sang a lot. So, there was a lot of song and dance and colour and music happening in this magical house.
Is that where the inspiration also for the red and blue details on those boxes came from?
Yeah. Well, she was such a great lady, but she was a very classical. She dressed in a very classical way. Like she liked
Very elegant.
She was elegant, but sort of she liked clean lines and sort of, classic kind of colours and styles. So she wore like, kind of like a navy blazer with a gold button, and her favourite two colours were navy and red. It wasn't just blue; it was
Navy specifically.
definitely navy. And so I based the palette of the entire exhibition on different clothing that she wore, both in terms of the design of the boxes, but also the space itself. And there was also, she used to also wear a lot of beige, and I've painted the room in this kind of very warm beige colour, and she also wore a tortoiseshell hair comb every day, and I've actually still got that hair comb, and I've used a similar material as part of the box. Yeah,
the one that props open and
Yeah.
has the beautiful engraving, embossing on it.
yeah,
Tell me about that minty green colour on the walls.
yeah. The minty green is a skivvy that she used to wear with beige, an emerald green skivvy with beige pants, brown shoes, and a beige jacket.
I love that. I also really enjoyed the family photos that were part of the exhibition, and the music.
Yeah,
It's part of that whole experience. In a way, we got to connect to all of our grandmothers in that
Yeah.
moment.
yeah. That's been like one of the lovely things. Is it's been a really powerful experience for me to create the work and really spend a lot of time thinking very deeply about both of my grandmothers and really getting into their story, both before I was born and then also after I was born, and the relationship that I had, well, with one of them more so because she was alive and the other died when I was very young. But what's been really beautiful is the feedback from so many people that I know and also complete strangers, is that it's really sort of touched them in a way that they have also kind of very much reflected on their own grandmothers, or even not having a grandmother, and sort of dealing with the sadness around that. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I definitely felt that visiting the exhibition. Incredibly powerful. Even the phrasing of one was this, one was that, one was this, one was that, where you de-identify which grandmother was who, in a
Yeah.
way, protect her privacy, protect that commentary, but also invite all of us to see our own grandmothers.
Yeah, that's so lovely that you say that, because I mean it was a something I really thought about, because it's very exposing, to sort of put your family out on display
Yes.
like that. But then a really important part of it for me was to kind of be real and expose things, but also to be protective of them and sort of make sure that they were honoured in a way that was beautiful, and kind of that they would have been comfortable. Well, hopefully they would have been comfortable with. Although I think I think my grandmother that I knew well would have probably been quite sort of overwhelmed and a little embarrassed, because she was shy and very humble. So she might not really have approved of me kind of, creating this homage to her so publicly. But
I think that's a great challenge of all art, isn't it? And particularly writers, right? They're constantly waiting for family members to perhaps not judge the work. But how do you find that strength and that confidence, or that moment, or the support, knowing that it's time to tell these stories, to show these narratives, to create this piece of design?
I mean, I've never really, it's kind of been a different type of work for me, because I do use a lot of personal narrative in my work, but I've never really involved my family, I suppose, in that. But also it's kind of, even when I'm telling my own sort of stories, there's more of a veil, I think, between what it really means to me and sort of what is public and what is private.
Yeah.
And I suppose with this, I just felt like it was really important to sort of just let go of that and just be really open and transparent and express through this project how much I you know, how beautiful these women were and how much I love them, you know, and kind of when you're sort of talking about family and thinking about, you know, in this instance, especially like the love of my grandmothers, you know, and what they sort of went through in their lives. And there was a lot of, you know, different periods of real sorrow and hardship. And then there were also periods of celebration and love and family. And I just thought there's no point shying away from all of it. Like I just have to sort of, I want to tell their story, but I want it to sort of be through a very personal lens and both a lens of from myself as a child, but then also through a new lens, which is me re-examining, you know, what they mean to me now as an adult and also as a mother.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's been really incredibly powerful for me to go through that process.
It's interesting how in so much creative production, something that's so extremely personal can expand to be so universal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing. It's like, you know, we all, you know, that we have so much in common, you know, and sometimes it can seem like we're so separate through our differences and there's so much divide, you know, in society and in the world. But actually, you know, that we do have so much common ground, you know, and that is one of the lovely things about this project is it doesn't matter what cultural background you come from. It's like, I think it's something that most people can relate to.
Yeah.
Mm.
What have you discovered in lifting that veil between public and private? What's been unexpected for you, or a nice revelation?
It's been quite amazing to just kind of be honest and like this is you know, my family. This is where I come from. This is, you know,
Your teenage photos are in there.
yeah. It's been. I was very anxious about it to begin with, like before when I went through the process of making this work, and also prior to actually exhibiting, I was quite stressed and quite nervous about putting all of this out there in the world. But then, having done so, I've kind of come into a sense of some new sense of strength and comfort in terms of, okay, well, this is who I am. This is it. Like it's honest and it's been really wonderful to get such positive feedback from people as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think you'd go back to drawing about that veil back up again?
It's interesting you ask that. I think it's shown me, the process has shown me that it's actually a wonderful thing to share, you know, more of yourself. And I think this process has given me some more confidence in that. So I hope to kind of like, you know, not necessarily it's always about me and my own life, but just kind of really, just sort of tapping into sort of like the deeper levels of storytelling, really. Like, and I think that I'm very interested in storytelling and how design can be a vehicle to tell stories. Yeah.
Why do you think that might be a harder thing to do in design? Like writing, art, music, those disciplines are so connected with the full rawness of the human condition or the full rawness of their own personal experience.
Yeah.
That's normal to say for them.
Yes.
Why is that something we don't really have a canon for in design?
Yeah, I mean, there's such sort of different realms. And I guess, you know, conventionally, I suppose design is attached to a client and a kind of functionality that's sort of quite practical as well. And obviously, you know, an emotional reaction or emotional response is, you know, extremely important in design. But I don't think I think it's a sort of interesting thing to sort of see it as an equal way of telling a story. I mean, it's obviously more direct when you're expressing something through, music or perhaps even drawing or painting something that just comes straight from your body. And then there's all these different things in between designing something that does come from you and your imagination and your body and your hand. But then there's so many different stages that it goes through before it actually gets put out there in the world.
That's very true.
So it's almost like kind of how do you go through those stages of, you know, production, but also kind of working within the constraints of whatever design project it is, and still holding the essence of something that's quite deep and something that's quite, you know, real and soulful.
That's a great challenge of the eternal academic question. What is your big idea? You always tell the students, right? What is the big idea? What's the one thing you have to hold on to when they cut your budget, when they take away all your money?
Yeah, and I find it fascinating. Like, I find it really interesting because I think sometimes, you know, it can be very successful, you know, in terms of it's gone through all these different stages and there's been so many people, there's so many hands in a design to make something come to life. And it is extraordinary when it does kind of retain its integrity at the end of it. But then sometimes it really doesn't, you know, and you can tell and you can feel it and it's lacking. So, yeah, I think it's just an interesting challenge to sort of embed story or embed whatever it is you want to embed, but to actually kind of, you know, work out ways to embed something important and true, and then within the design itself, and then it actually comes out once it's fabricated, made, built, etc. Yeah,
I love that. It's really beautiful descriptions.
Thank you.
Spiral me back to the beginning, early beginnings again. When did you know that design and theatre making and theatre set design was going to be for you?
Well, I didn't. Theatre certainly wasn't. I didn't intend to work as a set designer, which I did do for many years after I graduated from RMIT. I was intimidated by the world of architecture and interior design as a graduate, and I was intimidated because it just seemed just very, very serious, you know. And so, you know, it required a level of, you know, rigor and commitment, which I didn't really have. So in a way, I sort of found a world that allowed me to kind of design in a temporal way, and that really appealed to me at the time. Like it was like, I'm going to create this wonderful, marvelous thing, and then it's just going to come down, and it doesn't sort of have to stay there, and it's not sort of, you know, it's not made of sort of heavy duty materials. It's made of like gaffer tape and, you know, plywood and paint, and there was a lightness about it that appealed to me at the time. But also the world of theatre seemed like a place where I would fit in.
Yes.
And I enjoyed being around performers and directors and, you know, musicians and lighting designers and that kind of eclectic cohort of people felt really great. So essentially I sort of accidentally landed in that, but I really loved that world. And then it did also make sense in that, you know, I did kind of as a child, I kind of, you know, I was interested in performance and I was a performer myself, but I gave it up when I was when I hit puberty. I basically got very shy and I had an awful experience on the stage, which was really humiliating and embarrassing, and I didn't want to be on the stage anymore. So I'd always been sort of naturally quite good at music and art. And so once I realised that music or, you know, singing or playing music on a stage was kind of meaning that I was, you know, kind of up for scrutiny, I didn't want to do it anymore. So then art design became the place that I wanted to place my creativity. So in the end, of course, I've sort of come to understand that working in theatre but behind behind the
behind the
scenes.
So the permission to experiment.
Was a place where I felt like I could sort of access all of that, but I didn't have to be at the front.
There's so much to be said for those moments or opportunities where you can be creative without being forced into serious constraints.
Yes.
And how much that can actually advance the early career stages.
Yeah,
and where the seriousness can hinder things.
That's right. I learnt a lot, and I learnt a lot about sort of, which is interesting because I think a lot of the things that I did end up learning working in the world of theatre, I actually still use very much today. So I learnt how to kind of deal and use and maximize really basic materials for a start, and sort of use basic materials but use them in interesting ways. And also kind of, I guess colour became this like incredible tool for me because, I was working in stage sets, mostly in fairly experimental theatre spaces where our budgets were pretty tiny. So it was like I'd use colour and paint and light to sort of, amp up whatever it was I was trying to create. And I think that that's sort of obviously something that I've really taken through back into sort of interior spaces, both in residential and commercial. So yeah, I did learn a lot in that world, which has ended up being quite useful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And your trajectory is very clear in that way, that language you developed in the theatre, or that the design style is so evident in your work. What was that first step into interior design then, from that returning to what you were trying to avoid? How did that come about?
Well, I think eventually I started to feel as though I kind of decided that I was ready for more commitment. That was a big thing. I was ready to sort of be in one place as well. Like I had sort of moved around quite a bit and travelled and, not really wanted to sort of plant roots anywhere. So once I'd kind of really decided that, I wanted to be here, I was ready for commitment, and I also had this there was something missing, that I wasn't kind of getting necessarily from my design work in theatre, and I really wanted to give interior design a go because I hadn't really had the opportunity to before. And I was very lucky in that a friend of mine who owned a pub, who still owns a pub actually, in Brunswick, was planning to sort of open up a secondary bar upstairs in this beautiful old Victorian building. And he said, would you like to do the fit out? So he was the first person who really gave me my first gig, and I just loved it so much. Like I really got so much satisfaction out of attacking an actual space, like with,
a permanent space,
real bricks and mortar kind of project. And then that was like, okay, I'm ready. I really want to do this now, and this is what I want. So that kind of opportunity made it really clear that I really did actually want to be an interior designer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This should be really heartening for listeners that sometimes things just take time.
Yeah. Some people are really clear in, straight from the word go. But, I was clear that I knew whatever it is what I wanted to do was going to be design related, but I just didn't quite know what. Yeah.
What's your advice to students and young people who are unsure about their place in the world of architecture and interiors?
I think it's wonderful when you really do find your own voice through design, and that does take quite a lot of time, I think, and a lot of practice and a lot of trial and error. But to sort of, really make sure that you do sort of like trust your instincts, and you do have to have some sort of belief in yourself and what you have to offer that is unique, and actually that is what's going to make your work special.
Do you think your time in the theatre actually accelerated your ability to carve out your own style and have that critical reflection and engagement with your work and process?
I think because by the time I actually started my own studio, I was a bit older as well, and I was not only just ready for it, but I'd kind of stuffed up so many opportunities in up until that point at various stages. So I'd really learnt my lesson in terms of, knowing that like when opportunity presents, you really have to kind of make the most of it, be very grateful for it, and give it your all. And so by the time that I was ready to start working for myself and start my own studio, I think I had learnt some big lessons about what not to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still always learning and I'm still always making mistakes actually, but it's just ongoing. It's just ongoing learning and ongoing kind of coming into different stages and reflecting on things and seeing things that you might have done better perhaps had you have had some new insight, but it comes when it comes. So you just have to keep going. That's what I told this story recently, but I used to bump into Mercamora at the art shop in St Kilda when I was a uni student at RMIT, and I'd go in there because this was, in the days where we did everything on paper with pens and pencils, etc. And so I was always in the art shop getting, new supplies. And I'd bump into her there. I didn't know her, but she'd always she'd give me this huge hug every time I'd see her in the art shop. And she said to me one time, she goes, just have to keep going. Just keep going with your art. Just keep going with it. And I remember thinking that was a really, important sort of wise piece of advice. Yeah.
That's incredible.
And I do think of it sometimes when I'm like, oh, this isn't working or whatever.
What would Merca say?
Merca told me to keep going, so I will,
That's incredible. When did your first foray into objects and industrial design emerge?
I had always had a sort of, fantasy about designing furniture, and I have actually got lots of old sketchbooks with pieces of furniture that I designed over the years that never really amounted to anything. But I was very lucky in 2018, and I was invited to be. I was a finalist in the Rig Design Prize, which was at the NGV. It was an exhibition, but it was also an award. And 10 interior design studios were invited to present a large-scale installation in the gallery. In fact, all of the studios were very established and well-known, and I was kind of like the unknown, what do you call it?
Emerging.
Yeah, I was emerging. I wasn't even emerging. I was just a bit sort of out, not
fresh.
I was just fresh. No, I'd been going at it for a little while, but I hadn't sort of carved out, a space for myself at all. But anyway, this gave me a really wonderful opportunity to present my work to a broad audience and to sort of, also be on this be in the same platform with some of my, design heroes and colleagues who I just thought that was just extraordinary. I couldn't believe that I was being presented alongside these people, alongside of these studios. And I thought to myself, this is a great opportunity, not just to sort of present my work to a lot of people, but when am I going to get the opportunity to design a whole interior installation in a gallery?
Absolutely.
I may as well just design all the furniture in it as well, or the objects in it as well. And I didn't design every single object in the space, but I did make it a point of designing the sort of key pieces of furniture in the space. So it was a completely immersive installation with, which included the interior, but also had coffee table and a lounge setting and a large wall light and a record player. And so that sort of, that was the first time that I'd actually designed pieces of furniture that had been built. And I got so much joy out of seeing those pieces come to life. And then there was also interest in it. There was, people sort of actually wanted to purchase some of the pieces. And then it also opened this whole new stream up to me, which was designing, in gallery settings and in exhibitions, designing objects and furniture. And so
returning to your theatre world, returning to that container.
Yeah.
That's temporary.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's so different designing a piece, like one piece where there's so much focus on every tiny little detail and
the fabrication
and material, and everything is so considered. Not that it's not in an interior design scheme, but there's interiors are huge, like they're really complex and design projects, and there's so many moving parts, and you actually can't control everything in a way, and you never can, and you have to let go of certain things. But with furniture and objects, it's like you get to be more controlling.
You have to control every fixing, every join, every point, every intersection, everything, every moment. I first came in contact with your work and discovered it at the NGV Triennial, Chromatic Fantastic.
Yeah.
And I was obsessed.
That was so much fun. That was like the most wonderful brief I've ever had in my life. And I remember our first the first meeting with Ewan McCoy and Simone Leomon, and they said, this floor is going to be, the theme of this floor is really about light, but perhaps you can respond in terms of colour and light, and then your space are the decorative arts corridors. And I just was like, wow, like that. They're like it's like those balconies are like my fate,
It was so perfect because it was overlooking the largest stained glass ceiling in the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, the Leonard French ceiling. So that was really the key sort of inspiration for the work. So yeah, it was a real, that was a dream brief and a dream project.
Are you decisive with colour, or do you go through a lot of experimentation? Do you change your mind often? What's your relationship with it?
I'm decisive in that I allow my gut to tell me what's right and what's not. So I have very strong feelings about it. But I do a lot of experimentation. Like I have this system that I use, which I really
want to know about your process.
It's
so
a bit cuckoo.
Pray tell.
I mean, before I even really dig into the materials, I just go down to a paint shop and I go to the wall of swatches.
Yes.
And I just play, and I basically kind of create these sort of, I call them chords, like they're sort of, notes or chords. And I just create like a sort of, a little collection of colours that are describing something to me. And I'm in there sometimes for, a couple of hours, just like making sure I've got this wonderful combination. And then from there, I sort of hunt out how I can sort of emulate that through material.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And that is a repeated process for you with most of your projects, do you find?
With interiors, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered the Dulux Colour Atlas?
Yes. I like the Atlas. I mean, the Atlas is good because obviously there's more options, but nothing quite beats a
physical
swatch. Yeah. And the Atlas is difficult because it's like you can't sort of put the colour right next to the other colour that you want.
That's true.
Yeah.
I always go to Bunnings and think, but there's so many more in the Atlas.
Yeah. No, the Atlas is incredible.
Tell me about 10 combs, when the object becomes even smaller and you created these beautiful combs.
Yeah, that was a really, again, a very fun project. And it started off as part of an exhibition that was held at Design Week. I think it was 2022 or maybe 2021. that was put on by Friends and Associates, and it was the exhibition was called Self Portrait, and they invited different designers to contribute a piece that was in some way a self-portrait. And I came up with this idea to design a series of quite large, oversized hair combs that you could either wear or use to comb your hair. But they were all these there were sort of these cartoonish shapes. But the starting point for that project was I invited different friends close friends to come back to me with some descriptive words, both, positive and negative, that described my personality. So they kind of gave me all these, fantastic words. And then I invited a friend of mine who's a graphic designer he lives in London, Jonathan Ellery, he's an amazing graphic designer. So I thought I invited him to just collaborate on that project, and he developed the font and that was embedded within the actual combs that described all of these different traits.
What material were they actually made out of?
They were made out of they were 3D printed resin, and this was just the most miraculous thing to me, because I'd never worked with a 3D printer before, and I just couldn't believe that you just put in you just give them the file and then it prints. And you've got an object and you don't have to make it.
Were those the sort of early experiments in that tent combs to now I could have danced all night? The idea of the words being embossed and your grandma wearing the comb.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, there are definite links to that. The comb, I mean, this is the thing. I do find, like, sometimes things, you're coming up with ideas and you don't really necessarily always know where they come from. But then, of course, like more recently with this project, yes, the hair comb is a really key symbol in that work. So obviously that was, hanging around over a couple of years ago back there. And again, yes, embedding words within a material. Because one of the things that I've done with this new show is I have etched, or a machine has etched the titles of the different songs that my grandmother used to sing into the trays. I should say, actually, that project, I worked with a furniture maker called Brent Hall, who has a small workshop called Marfa Furniture, and he made both of those boxes for my exhibition. I Could Have Danced All Night, and he, they were little miracles, of themselves.
So. Because you were repurposing a dresser, is that right?
Well, one of the boxes is made, the jewellery box is made of repurposed material from an old Art Deco vanity dresser that belonged to my other grandmother that I haven't yet spoken about. And she's the one who died when I was very young. But she had this whole bedroom suite that, my grandfather used until he died. And when he passed away, I inherited some pieces of furniture, including this wonderful old Art Deco dresser. And I used the timber from that dresser to create this new repurposed jewellery box that was part of the I Could Have Danced All Night show.
Wonderful. So many threads and intersections. Yeah. And again, the crisscrossing where we don't really get to know who's who, where it came from. Which grandma is the origin or the source of the idea. You're interthreading them.
Yes.
As both of them come in and become you.
That's right. Yeah. No, it's interesting that you really picked up on that, like sort of that you don't necessarily know it. You know a lot about these women, or you don't know a lot, but you know little snippets of information about these women, but without it being clear who's who, whose story is which, who belongs to this box, who belongs to that box. And I think in some ways that was part of what you were talking about before was, somehow protecting them. It's like yes. I'm giving away a lot, but I'm not giving away everything. There's still things that are sort of,
Now I understand why you dodged the first question about whose house it was.
Oh, yeah, interesting. Yes. Yeah.
As an ongoing thread, these industrial design objects, you often collaborate with a lot of other makers to bring them into existence. Tell me a little bit about that process. And
yeah, well, I'm not a maker myself. I mean, I'm a terrible maker. It's like I can make things very not well. So I've found some fantastic fabricators and collaborators, a lot of whom have their own practice and studios, and they produce lighting and furniture and objects, and they and I sort of work with them to create my pieces. And some of those collaborations have become more ongoing. Like I have a collaborator, Edward Lineker, who's a lighting designer and he studied industrial design as well. And we've been collaborating on a project for the last few years called Meteorite. And so interestingly, like at first I sort of just invited him in almost like a contract, a contractor to create something. But then, of course, his investment and his knowledge and his design input becomes so integral to the design that's really not just mine anymore. Like it is, very much a kind of...
It's back to those multiple hands.
Yeah, it's back to those multiple hands. And also sometimes you sort of recognise that I can't do, what I can come up with on my own is nowhere near as interesting as what I can come up with another collaborator. So those relationships become really important, and it's wonderful when you find people that you enjoy collaborating with, and it just works. And yeah, I've been really fortunate to have several actually.
With the comet, this stacking kind of triangular cones of colour. I see so much of, or meteorite, sorry. I see so much of the chromatic fantastic and that stacking and grouping of colour. Yeah. And abutting it together and really... And now I'm going to forever imagine you at Bunnings grabbing a little paint sample.
There's definitely some sort of like, I don't know, there's definitely a lot of repetition and coding and sort of, formulas. They're not real. I just sort of invent them, or they come sort of fairly intuitively. Yes. But yeah, there's definitely threads between my pieces, and I think a language has been developing over the last few years, and it's that thing of you sort of can't take yourself out of something. Like you just you're always in your own design. But yeah, so all those things that you're picking up on are absolutely recurring.
As we're having this conversation and we continue spiraling back through it, I'm starting to realise that perhaps I could have danced all night is much more about you than actually your grandmother's, because that essence starts intersecting like a double helix.
It absolutely is. It is about me, absolutely, and understanding where I come from and how I came to be me. And the sort of the different influences, from two sets of families that are actually very different and complex and, wonderful and fraught, like all of the things. And then examining the story of those two women has helped me sort of understand how I make sense to myself, really. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the future, and let's talk about that through the kindergarten project, the Early Learning Centre. Yeah. Because I often like to ask people what inspires them, what was giving them hope and optimism. And for many of people, that's children. Yeah. And how amazing to bring your design language and palette of colour and the theatrical and fantastical elements of your work to an Early Learning Centre. How was that project?
Yeah, I mean, that's, again, it's sort of, I didn't set out to work in that space. It kind of happened. So it happened accidentally, but then of course it makes total sense that my design work, does sit so well in a space for children and in a space for learning. And I just love it. Like I just want to do more and more kind of spaces, learning spaces for children. Like I just find it, I just love it. It makes me feel I feel like I'm almost, when I'm designing the spaces, I'm imagining children, using these spaces, and that brings me a lot of joy. And I feel good about designing for them as my clients. Really, they're not my clients,
Yes.
but I imagine they're my
Yes.
clients. And then one of the things I also really like, and something that I've realized is quite important for me, is I also really like designing interiors that a lot of people can use.
Mm-hmm,
you
mm-hmm.
know,
The democratized spaces.
yeah, and that sits really well for me. I want to continue to do that. I mean, the one recently in Sydney was sort of like, it's sort of like early education on steroids. Like, it's a crazy space, and the clients.
What an amazing client to commission something like that.
Clients are just fantastic, and they really they place so much faith in me, and they just kind of said, you just go for it, just do it, come up with
What a blessing.
whatever you want to do. And I kept sort of proposing these things, thinking, surely they're not gonna go for that. And they're like, yeah, that's great, we love it.
So what was that big core idea, that essence you were chasing in that project?
Well, that one, I always do like to sort of that one specifically. I mean, that project is in a beautiful location. It's like it's on Sydney Harbour, so it's kind of like surrounded by the most magnificent nature you can imagine. Well, for me anyway, like the first time I went to the site, I was just like, this is just so beautiful. There's so much green everywhere, and it's subtropical almost, and there's the harbour, and there are birds, and it just it's this wonderful location. So it was always very important to celebrate that location.
Yes.
So the harbour, in a sense, is the muse for
Yes.
that project. So there's a lot of references to the sea and to boats and birds and rainbows and sunsets and water and light and so it is they're kind of fairly broad general themes, but it does make sense in terms of the locale.
And the themes everyone can connect to, and that's how you start creating pluralistic architecture.
Yeah, totally. One of the nice things I love about the project is the different floors as well. So like all of the ground floor it talks to the water and the water and the land, and then the first floor talks to the sky and the sun, and the themes sort of respond to those different,
Fantastic.
yeah, those different realms.
Different realms and layers, and you could
Yeah.
say go to the water room, go to the sun room.
Yeah.
That's really wonderful. So you want more public projects. You want something that becomes accessible to all people. Say something about the importance of making design accessible and making design democratized.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think sometimes like design can be intimidating, and it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. I mean, maybe not in some countries that's kind of embedded. Design is embedded in everything.
Yes. Design is everywhere, and everything is a design decision. We keep saying this
in
on the
Australia,
program.
I think there can be a sort of like, there's a sort of, I don't even know what it is, but it almost feels as though, design is only available for, wealthy people, and I think that that's awful. Like,
Yeah.
I think that design is such an important part of our lives and of occupying space, and I just think it's necessary to kind of treat each space or each project that you come into contact with a level of respect, and a level of respect for whoever it is that's using it. And yeah, that's sort of, I don't know. That's
Here.
Yeah,
Here
totally.
with intention and with care.
Yeah, with care. And it can, I mean, I did think about like, particularly like with the childcare, like, because I realised that the childcare space, that one that I've just recently worked on, is so wonderful. Like, it really is an extraordinary space for children to be. And then I was thinking about, like, you know, there are so many spaces for kids that are kind of really
Saccharine.
unpleasant, you know, and I don't know, like, just stark and uncomfortable and dull and
Undermine a children's curiosity, undermine children's capacity.
yeah, there's
they
no
don't give
need.
them credit.
There's no need that we can't sort of provide these wonderful spaces at all times. You know, I mean, obviously there's, you know, constraints with everything, but yeah, I don't know. It's a big question. It's a big question, Ilana.
I do ask those questions on this program. You are such a decorated designer. You've won so many awards and have had so many really, really incredible opportunities. And in many ways, it feels like you're really just getting started. And coming back to what you tried to avoid in a way, leaving that world of interiors, and now you've come full circle and you've got a renewed vigor for interior design and the world of architecture. What has been your greatest lesson in that time?
Another really big question. Greatest lesson. I think it's the same piece of advice that I would give the person starting out, is just sort of, the biggest lesson for me has been to realize that what I have to offer is enough. Like, you know, I don't have to be anything more. Like, it's okay. What I have to offer is unique and it's interesting and it's, you know, it's enough. Whereas I think for a long time I didn't think that what I had to offer was enough. And I was actually, you know, particularly when I first started out, I was sort of trying to mould myself into something that I thought other people wanted me to be, or I thought, you know, I thought interior design should be this or that. And then there was something about kind of coming into some awareness that, and it was definitely through the opportunity to exhibit work publicly, that I came to understand that my bent or unique, whatever flavour that is enough, and people enjoy it and people respond to it. And I granted myself permission to be, you know, more authentic in terms of how I would design and what I wanted to design.
It's such an important lesson for listeners to hear, especially for women.
Yeah. It takes a long time it took me a long time to find my confidence. And I had several experiences early on that sort of knocked me off my block, and that was good, but it took me a long time to sort of rebuild my confidence. Yeah. I was too nervous to even, you know, go into a client meeting when I started. It was like, oh no, I've got nothing. Oh God, you know, I'll be shown up. But it's definitely, it's more relaxing once you sort of accept yourself, you know, and you can offer more. You actually can offer more.
And you can create, as you're saying, you can offer more, you can create more, you can offer so much more to the world of design and the outcomes and the people and the children, the communities that you're serving and designing for. Yeah. Who have been some of your biggest mentors or supporters?
Well, one of my biggest supporters and mentors is Simone Leamon from the National Gallery of Victoria. She's a curator of design there, and she's a mentor and a supporter of many people in Melbourne. She gave me, I suppose, my first opportunity to exhibit my work publicly. She opened that door, I suppose, or she presented my work to the gallery, and that was, you know, that has led to all sorts of extraordinary opportunities. And yeah, she's also that person. She's that person for many people in our community. She does all sorts of extraordinary work through the National Gallery in terms of amplifying, supporting, showcasing, you know, local designers from very tiny studios who sort of wouldn't necessarily have a space to show their work. And she's been an extraordinary supporter.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Who are other designers that you admire and you look at their work and get inspired?
I love India Madhavi.
Yeah.
I think she's one of my heroes, and Faye Toogood is another hero. I think there's some extraordinary women in design.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I think that when I graduated from RMIT a long time ago, which was in the early 2000s, I think one of the reasons that I found the world daunting was it was very austere. Design was very austere, and there wasn't much kind of play really. And I think that there are some key leaders, women in design, who have kind of brought more of themselves to that space, and it's also kind of freed things up in a sense. And now there is sort of an opportunity to kind of be more playful and expressive, and I suppose comes back to what I said before, was sort of feeling comfortable being,
Yes.
being my authentic self, which is a little bit, I don't know.
It's a life's work.
Yeah, it is a life's work.
You've no doubt opened so many doors and windows for the next generation of designers who, when you couldn't see yourself in the profession because you had to be that for yourself, you've now created that for others. No doubt.
Thank you. I hope so. That would be really lovely if I kind of I love meeting, young designers and talking to them about what they want to achieve. And, you're so nervous when you finish as well. Like, it's sort of such an unknown, and it is hard to carve out your own path. But as Mirka said, you just keep going.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. She decided to just grab you and hug you in the shop.
She did. I didn't know her. She would just come up and just pull me into her chest and give me this big solid hug.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm mindful of the time, so I'll ask my last question, and that's, what gives you hope?
Oh, your questions, they're big. What gives me hope? In humanity, or in...
However you want to answer that, in whatever comes up for you and whatever facet you think feels right, or all of them.
I think I just recently went on a adventure overseas, and I always enjoy the experience of being anonymous, and it's almost like this wonderful opportunity to just sort of register who you are without anyone knowing who you are, and how the world receives you, And I had all these wonderful experiences, I have my experiences with people I know, but then all these wonderful experiences and encounters with strangers. And I think those encounters with strangers give me hope, really, because they're so raw and they're so basic, and you see people's kindness, and you see people's generosity, and you see people's warmth, and that is, I guess, what brings me hope, is people's warmth, and remembering that actually there are a lot of good people in the world, and people are actually, mostly kind, and often kind to strangers, and that gives me hope.
That's a beautiful note to end our conversation on. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, Danielle.
Thanks, Ilana.
Thanks for joining me for another evening of radio architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
Hello, I'm Ashley Naylor, and you're listening to Radio Karim. Stay tuned, everybody.